All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Before we get just a few housekeeping items to discuss, you'll see on the screen we ask you to mute your microphone so that each listener can hear our awesome speaker, Jennifer. We're also recording, so please be sure that your microphones remain muted throughout the entire webinar for best recording. We encourage you to ask your questions throughout the webinar via the chat box, and you can see that in the Join Me tab that appears on your screen. And those questions will be compiled and answered at the end of the presentation as time allows. So my name's Emily, and I'm TrackLight's Digital Content Coordinator as well as your moderator for the webinar. We're very happy to have Jennifer Hill, co-founder of 60 Vocab, to discuss today's topic, taking a plunge into entrepreneurship, how to dive in intelligently. Jennifer Hill was an international startup, left a stable career as a senior attorney to launch a tech startup company. 60 Vocab is an adaptive gaming platform, online and mobile, to learn, retain, and recall conversational foreign language vocab. 60 Vocab was selected by Forbes as a 2014 Startup to Watch and a semifinalist in the Milken Business Plan competition for the nation's most promising EdTech startups. It was recently featured in Entrepreneurship magazine as well as BBC Capital in the story on how to ditch the 9-to-5 life. 60 Vocab just launched its iOS and Android, awesome, featuring an offline mode for convenient learning anywhere, anytime. So without further ado, Jennifer, take it away.
Thank you very much, Emily, for the introduction. And welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to attend the webinar and to learn a little bit more about plunging into entrepreneurship. I'm particularly happy to speak about this, one, because it's my passion and I'm very excited about the business that I'm working on. Two, because as a lawyer, that's probably one of the most stable and risk-averse jobs. So I think a lot of people can relate to going from one extreme to the other. And third, because I am from Arizona, so anything attached to the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation that I can do to be supportive of, I am always happy to do so. And with that, I'm going to walk you through for the next hour a few different things to help give you a sense of exactly what it means to take the dive and some advice on approaches to take. Obviously, people have a variety of backgrounds who are on the call and are at different points in their life, both professionally and personally. And I think at any of those, you can still find a way to decide whether it's right for you. And also, if you do decide it's right for you, how to make the best decisions for yourself and your business as you are jumping in. So this is what we're going to cover today. So first is just a bit of background about myself, so you have an idea of where I came from and my experience and how that related to what I'm doing. 3 questions to ponder that I think every person who's interested in entrepreneurship should ask themselves. And then we'll talk about things you can do to prepare both on the personal side for doing it as well as for your business. And then some key advice that I got along the way that's been very instrumental into making the transition easier, both personally and professionally. And we'll also leave plenty of time for Q&A. So the first is just a quick background about myself. I'm, like I said, from Arizona, was raised there most of my life and have spent all the years since then moving around the country and around the world in pursuit of different opportunities. So as much as I love Arizona and it's always my home, I always had this desire to explore different professions in different countries. So my mix of technology, which has been the base part of my career, which started after I graduated from Stanford, has taken me to Chicago, to Austin, to San Francisco, to London, to France, and to New York. And I feel very fortunate to have been able to work in a bunch of different environments. Just to give you a quick idea of how my career path progressed, I went to school in Silicon Valley, and like many students who graduated, wanted to work in technology because it was something I hadn't really been exposed to before. So I spent a number of years on the business side helping enterprise software companies, both startup companies and more established companies, develop businesses and channel strategies in the US and abroad. And one of the things that I learned as I was doing that and doing a lot of different deals was the first people I would throw out of the conversations were the lawyers, because they were in many ways far more risk averse than I was on that particular transaction. And I thought that there really was a need for people who were business minded, but also understood the legal content to help entrepreneurs make great decisions as they're taking risk. So even as I started in the working world, I kind of knew that would be my focus. And thus I pursued a JD MBA at Northwestern and Kellogg with a heavy emphasis on working with emerging companies. And when I graduated, I went to work for a law firm in Silicon Valley, Fenwick & West, that works just with startups and mature companies acquiring startups, so that I could get as much experience as possible doing deals and seeing how startups make decisions on entity selection, on fundraising, on when to buy and sell, on how to develop all new channel strategies. It was really the conduit where I could get the most experience in the least period of time. And unlike many lawyers, as I'm sure you know many lawyers who may feel this way, I found a way to make my job even more interesting because I was even willing to take risk within that. So for example, I would raise my hand for the really tricky opportunities that required team management or very complex transactions around the world. I launched my firm's office in New York right before the recession. I also took time out of my legal career to get more operational experience through the Obama for America campaign in Pennsylvania, as well as through ASTIA, which is a nonprofit helping women entrepreneurs in high growth industries get fundraising. So as I kind of went back and forth between very stable, getting experience working with startups, and then taking time out and getting operational experience, I realized that as my career was going forward, I had gained a number of skills in three core capacities. Number one was production, and I really enjoyed taking all the different pieces, as crazy and disparate as they were, and putting them together. The second was I had a really strong background in commercial deals and understanding how you build strong relationships with customers, as well as fundraisers and board members and partners. And the third was I like solving problems, and the weirder the better. So as I had continued along my career and went back to law, I realized that at some point I was going to make the jump, and found myself kind of testing my experience through nonprofits, through assisting other startups, through working through the New York tech community, advising startups, just finding a way to immerse myself as much as I could before I was ready to make the leap on my own. And then through that process, I met my co-founder, who is a technical person, and we started noodling on ideas and came up with 60 vocab. So to make a long story short, 60 vocab was a eureka moment that my co-founder Kevin Ramirez had when he was in Costa Rica on a post-work vacation for a few months. And as a person who took 8 years of Spanish, he realized that he couldn't speak a word. Spanish is my second language, and I'm thus fluent in it, and found that interesting that he had taken so much but still couldn't speak. And so we started looking at the language market and realized that there were a lot of expensive programs out there, a lot of free things out there, but that most people didn't really want to learn to be able to write French poetry. They just wanted to be able to speak more effectively on vacation. So together we came up with an approach that worked on figuring out the easiest way in which people could acquire those words. And he came up with a game that allows people to both track how they're doing, have the game adapt as the individual learns, so that it always knows how well you're doing, and that you're focusing on the things that you don't know to get you to conversational recall faster. The genesis of the name 60 vocab comes from the fact that if you know 2,000 words, you know 60% of a foreign language. So the first thing the game teaches you is 2,000 words. And we're very excited to have launched within the last year, both on the web as well as on both iOS and Android. So if you have a mobile phone, smartphone, and want to start brushing up on your language skills, the app is free. Please download it.
In a nutshell, we are a life hack for learning conversational foreign language. We're targeted towards anyone at any stage of language because we're a vocabulary supplement or vocabulary building tool. We also work with educational institutions that are working on flipping the classroom, meaning that they are taking content that's traditionally been taught in class that can be made more fun and interesting through, for example, technology like a game that students can work on outside the class to free up class time for higher value activity. So we are on the web. You can play us on a tablet, and we also are very proud that we just launched our Apple and our Android apps, which are free and work offline. So if you're sitting on the subway and you have no internet connection, it's a great time to start brushing up on your Spanish vocab. Or Italian, French, German, or Portuguese. I am going to go to the next slide, which is why I made the jump. There we go. In a nutshell, there were 3 reasons. The first is that I was ready, and time met opportunity of having a team and an idea that I was very passionate about, had viability, and it was a direction that I wanted to take my career in. And while I had a successful law practice, there was more that I wanted to accomplish, and the one piece that I have missed and have tried to build in and around my job was actually building something. And that is something that I really wanted to do next. So this was a great opportunity to do it. The second was, personally, and it's something I'll talk about more in the presentation, I was also fortunate to be in a point where I could take this risk and sustain this risk. And the third was, like I said, I was ready. I was ready and was also in a mental place to look at this as an opportunity as opposed to a more binary success or failure. And I think that binary view is something that often holds people back unfairly when we're really a lot more resilient than we realize. So the next slide, that was a bit about me in the business and my background and passions, but one of the first things to do to prepare yourself for entrepreneurship, or even to diagnose whether you are interested in it and what your temperature is for it, is to build a list of your strengths and passions and figure out what those are. A lot of us don't think about that on a daily basis, or it may be limited to what's on our resume. And thus, I would encourage you to spend some quiet time in your favorite place, taking inventory of your skills and experience, both from a professional standpoint, the things that you have learned in jobs, that you're good in at jobs, that people hire you for, and also things that have absolutely nothing to do with what it is that you do at work. You may be a brilliant interior designer. You may be wonderful at throwing dinner parties. You may have the most amazingly organized house on your block. All of these things that you may discount day to day actually can be crucial to figuring out what your next step is and can be real strengths for your business. Also, take a look at extracurricular activities to the extent you have time are interesting you. Maybe it's volunteering at a school or a community center, working with other startups. There may be a particular cause that you're passionate about. All of those things throw on one piece of paper and keep that with you, because over time, as you're working through your ideas or what you want to do next, all of that data is incredibly helpful and incredibly relevant. You may not see the connection today, but by looking at it and working through it, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, somehow it will all make sense, and you'll realize that everything that you've done has prepared yourself for this great next move. And while you're doing that, I highly encourage you to take time to ponder these 3 questions. And these are 3 questions that I think anyone pursuing something that's a little bit riskier in their life should be able to answer, because they will help guide you as to what your motivations are, as well as prospective obstacles that you could work through to get where you want to be. So the first one is, what motivates you? Are you a person that gets up in the day and is so excited to be going to your job and doing what you're doing? Is it the fact that you're working? Is it the paycheck? Is it the people? Is it the concept? Whatever motivates you, it's really important to understand what that is. And it's not a question we often ask ourselves because we get so caught up in the day-to-day of our lives, but it's very important for guiding what's next. The second is, what scares you? I think it's very easy to get very comfortable where we are both in life and our careers, and we often don't have the opportunity to do things that scare you. And every day as an entrepreneur, you have to be doing things that scare you, particularly because there are a lot of things that are new. And often things that are new are things we don't have experience with, scary. So making a list and understanding what those monsters are that are hiding under the bed makes it much easier to work through them as you decide or actually plunge into your next step. And the third question is a random one, which is, what's for dinner? And the reason that I have that question listed here is the answer to that question gives you a really good sense of what your lifestyle is like and or what you want your lifestyle to be like. For example, are you the person that is asking that question? Are you the person that is coming up with the answer to that question every night? Are you a person who gets home and orders takeout, who MacGyvers whatever's in the fridge to put together dinner? Do you plan out your meals on a Sunday and go grocery shopping or order everything online? You can learn a lot about yourself and how you approach problem solving and also approach your work-life balance by simply looking at the answer to that question. So I highly encourage all of you to do that. And when you've got all this information, the next thing is to figure out when you might be ready. And this isn't a linear process. You're really only ready when you're ready, and that looks, sounds very trite, but is very true. That's a very different place for many different people. I think there are things that you can do in order to get ready, to help you figure out whether, one, this is something that you want to do. And, that's a mix of trying things out. Have you thought about, for example, being more entrepreneurial in your current job? Are there new projects you can take on? Is there a new business you can raise your hand and try to run? Is there a new skill set that you want to acquire that you could have the opportunity to do where you are? Are there things outside of the office that you can get involved in? For example, a community event, something with the school or university, mentoring. Is there something that you can do to work on a project non-work related from beginning to end with a lot of volunteers? And the reason I say that is when you have people that are not being paid to show up every day working on a project, there's a very different sense of commitment, and you get more of a realization of what it's like to work in a startup environment, if not necessarily having the resources that you need at the time that you want. Asking for a lot of favors, just getting comfortable with asking for things. Anything that you can do to help flex those muscles will give you a good sense of what you like about it and what you dislike. And this isn't to say if everything doesn't go peachy or you don't love every minute of it, that doesn't equate to you not being ready or not being an entrepreneur. It's simply another experience that you can draw from and use whatever your next step is. The second is letting go. I can tell you from personal experience that thinking about letting go is far scarier than actually doing it. The day that I left was in some ways a non-event because it wasn't though I was leaving a bunch of things behind. It was closing a door and opening another one, and that was a wonderful feeling to have, to feel like I could step out and go forward into this next exciting thing in my life. The third is get in the practice of looking forward towards things, because as an entrepreneur, things move very quickly and you need to move very quickly. And when you deal with setbacks, you do have to be willing to put them in perspective, take a quick lesson, and then move quickly from them instead of dwelling on them, which can be challenging, but is definitely necessary. And then figuring out what you want your future to be like. Again, the point at which you're ready is different for everybody, and it's up to you to kind of decide what things need to be in place before you actually make the leap. Let's see if the next slide comes up. There we go. So a few things to help prepare yourself for the jump a little bit better. The first, of course, is what are you jumping to? Are you going to be a person that just stops everything and focuses on the idea without having tested it out? Are you going to kick the tires first a little bit? Are you joining a team? Are you joining something that isn't actually your idea, but you've found an idea that you can get very excited about and a team to help build it? They're all different ways in which to do it, regardless of whether you're doing this in parallel while you're still working at your existing job, maybe moonlighting or doing this on nights and weekends. I would say the more time you can spend focusing on the idea, the better. The more time you can spend testing it out with customers, whether through screenshots or product demos or whatever it is to get a sense of whether there's a market out there and someone to buy your product, the better. It's very exciting to dive in and start building things, but you also have to keep in mind as to whether there's a market for it. So the more time you can spend on the idea, the better. And there's plenty of of great information and around the web about how to do that and to constantly test it. If any of you are familiar with the Lean Startup Method, there's a book by that name. There's a whole community around that. That is a great methodology to figure out very quickly and iterate very quickly on your product and determine whether there's a market. The second thing is to think about the vision for your workday and what that looks like. One of the key things in a startup is that no day is ever the same, and that is very exciting. If you are a person that thrives on routine and really needs that, and that is what makes you thrive, then think about ways in which you can build routine into your day in order to give you that boost of productivity. It could be as simple as finding a separate workspace instead of working at your house. It could be, starting with a particular set of tasks in the morning that help you be productive and ending in a particular way. We all have different work styles, and I think the key is to figuring out what works best for you so that you can get the most productivity out of it. But again, also thinking about what you want that day to look like and how this new venture that you're going into can play into that. One thing to think about as well is depending on what kind of business you're trying to start, what the impact is on your lifestyle. Not everybody has to quit what they're doing and go full force into the new business. There are a lot of businesses that people start at night on weekends while they are doing something else. For example, my best friend runs an after-school program for the performing arts in the state of Arizona. There are all that curriculum has pretty much been taken out of the schools, and her business is called the Art and Soul Performing Arts Program, and she actually started it while she was teaching full-time. And she started off with, one class, with 2 classes, and over time she built it up such that she was ready to leave her full-time teaching job to run that program. And now she has 8 or 10 classes across Scottsdale and Phoenix. But that was a business that she could both fund and dedicate her time to while she was working a full-time job. And as she was doing that for a number of years, she was able to refine the idea, refine the business model, and get it to a point where for her and her family, she could safely step into her entrepreneurial dreams full-time. So not every business actually requires the same amount of commitment and the same amount of capital. So understanding what the business idea is that you are passionate about and what the impact of that business is on your lifestyle will give you an idea of how to do that. There are, like I said, a variety of different things. It could even be simple as consulting. Consultants are entrepreneurial in their own right, and every day they're out working to build their portfolio of business. That could be something that you're starting while you're doing your existing job, if you're permitted to do so. It could be something that you're doing on weekends. It could be something that you're doing in a different industry. There are a lot of ways to kind of get your feet wet. So thinking about how to do that and what makes sense is one of the keys to preparing yourself for the jump. Another key tip, of course, is taking stock of your finances. That's obviously a very important piece, both for yourself personally as well as for your business. One of the things that I did that really helped was making a personal budget as well as a business budget for the next 3 years, and understanding and thinking about all of the different key financial events that would be happening and how starting a business would impact them. So are you buying a house? Are you having a child? Are you, there are obviously unforeseen things that come up. So how do you plan for rainy days in your own life? And that gives you an idea of a couple things. One is if you are putting money into your own business, how much of that capital you are safely able to risk. And the word safely is different for every person. The second is how much runway can you go, depending on whether you're still working a full-time job or not, to actually put that into your business. Because the way to look at capital is starting your business, particularly if you are jumping into it full force and working full-time, not only is the dollar investment you're putting in, but also the income that you're foregoing in order to pursue it. So being very honest with yourself and your family about your finances is extremely important. And also goes into my last point, which is gaining support of your family. I have a husband who is very supportive of this, but one of the things that we did when I started was we had a very honest conversation, not only about the business and, how I'm going to deal with the ups and downs and how we're going to deal with the financial piece, but also what I needed from him in terms of his support, both emotionally, logistically, financially, et cetera. And I think the more honest you are with your partner, the easier it's going to be on you, because there are a lot of ups and downs. and you need someone outside of your business to be a big support from you. So if you don't have a partner, this could be family, it could be a group of friends. I think the more people that you can surround yourself with within whatever is defined as your personal support network to not only help you make a decision to do this, but also to help you through good times and bad times is really, really good. You need your own cheerleading team, but you also need one where you can be honest with them about how things are going, and they can be honest with you to help give you the best guidance and keep you productive and performing to your best self the whole way through. So those are some of the tips that I think are good for preparing yourself personally, and then of course it is preparing your business. What I mean by preparing your business for you is you've got this great idea, you've got to make it happen. What are all the different pieces that are involved in it? And again, there's plenty of stuff you can find about how to write a business plan, how to create a slide deck, how to think through your business. These are just a couple of the key pieces to focus on. And you'll see I've left a lot of blanks because depending on what your business idea is, there's a whole lot of others that you would be able to better write in there as opposed to me. The first, of course, is the idea generation. Where are you getting it from? How long have you sat with this? Is there a market? Have you been able to figure out whether there's a market? The more you can do to test your idea, the better. And the second piece, the viability of it. The third is what resources are you going to need? Do you need people? Do you need technology? Do you need raw materials? What are all the things you need in order to make your idea into a product? So taking stock of what those resources are and where you think you can get those resources, both financially and, of course, figuring out how you're going to fund this business, but also a team. Do you plan on going into this on your own? Do you plan on going into business with someone you know? Do you plan on this being your show, but you're going to hire people to do things? If you are going to hire them, are you going to hire full-time employees straight away? Are you going to hire contractors? Are you going to call in every favor from every person under the sun to try to help you? Entrepreneurs do all of those things. And oftentimes, understanding where the boundaries are of calling in favors versus hiring someone, these are challenges and exciting points with which you can work through. One thing that I think is always true is that it always costs more and takes more time and needs more people than you think it will. So it's easy for someone to say that. When you actually feel it, that's when you get into what will probably be some of your better problem-solving moments. The next piece is the timeline. So both what is the timeline for launching your business, as well as what is the timeline for your 100% participation in the business, if that is what is required. Otherwise, what is your timeline for actively working on it and thinking about how you're going to use that timeline to define your success? And then ultimately, what is your goal for the exit strategy? Can you run two businesses at once? A lot of people can, and that's fantastic, and that works for them. Is this a business where it really does require you working full time? Is this a business that you think can be financially viable and continue on in a way that provides an income to you and to your team? Is this something that you want to grow into a bigger venture that works in multiple locations or has a broader customer base? Is it something that you eventually hope somebody will acquire? One piece of advice I do have is to think as big as possible for your business. It's not going to all happen for day one, but it's incredibly motivating as you continue on and see your success. And the higher you reach, the harder you'll work, and the higher you reach, the further you will actually get. So all of these factors are incredibly important to think through, and will help make your eventual jump a little bit easier, because you'll feel more comfortable with the working parts of the business, understanding where your goals are and what your metrics are, and also what you need to actually make them happen. That actually makes the jump easier because you're taking some of the scariness factor out of the risk. When you first think of the idea, it's very exciting and can be very scary, and once you break it down into actually how you're going to make it happen, it suddenly seems much more achievable. Tips for success. So for this last part of the presentation, I've compiled some of the best advice that I got from people as I was starting my business. And the first thing is to build your own personal advisory board. I would suggest 3 to 5 people that know you from different facets of your life that can provide different advice. There are ones that are truly the cheerleaders that are proud of you for whatever you do, and you can always keep you positive. I would add a person that has industry experience, either building a product, being an entrepreneur, working in this particular industry, someone that knows a lot about this, that can help be your sanity check for what you're doing. I would try to get one or two or three other people. I think 3 to 5 is a manageable number that you admire and feel comfortable talking to and will give you the time. This is different from an advisory board that you would build for your business. These are literally people that you can call to say, hey, is this a good decision? Am I thinking about these things correctly? Or the world has fallen apart. It seems to have fallen apart. What do I do? Having that personal support network in a way that is unique to your business is incredibly helpful. That was one of the first things that I did, and I call on those people all the time. And I'm fortunate. Some of them are friends. Some of them are people I've met through professional circumstances, and I use different people's time differently. But I feel very fortunate that there's a group of people that I can call on outside of my business to lend me advice when I need it through all different points in the process. The second is get quality legal, accounting, and intellectual property advice. And although I am a lawyer, I will say that some of the things that people find scariest, and also where many mistakes are made early on, is in these 3 areas, both legal in terms of getting the entity selection right. The second is accounting and figuring out how to set up your books, how to set up the entity in a very tax efficient way. And also, you may be having investors, and there may be a particular way to structure it that is more effective for investment. And the third piece, of course, is understanding what intellectual property you are creating and how you can best protect that intellectual property, which is great that there are companies like TrackLight out there that actually help entrepreneurs do that. Because I will say, as my experience as a lawyer and also an experience working with a number of startups is, there are a lot of different moving parts to what intellectual property is and what you're creating, and not everybody protects it in a proper way. But your idea and the guts behind your idea and the manifestation of your idea is one of the single most important assets, if not the most important asset, as part of your business. So spending a little time and finding guidance from great people who really know this stuff early on will make your business journey infinitely easier and help you avoid what are common mistakes in each of these 3 categories along the way. One of the great things is that as startups become more and more accessible, there are a lot of practitioners in all of these areas that are making rates and access to it more affordable, so the startups can make smarter decisions early. Oops. And the last piece of success advice, which I received from a variety of entrepreneurs, is remember that tomorrow doesn't look like today. And one of the things that I have found as an entrepreneur is that there's this tremendous desire for control and hoping that all the efforts that you're putting in today will lead to a direct particular outcome tomorrow. And no matter what your best intentions are, and no matter how hard you work, it doesn't always work out that way. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Our business has gone in entirely new and exciting directions that we would never have figured out if there weren't bumps along the road. But if you're prepared for a lot of change and prepared to realize that this is all part of the experimental process, that there isn't a linear path to success, that there really aren't any overnight successes despite what you may read in all of the publications, it will make the entire journey a little bit easier to stomach. I think it's very exciting to be starting your own business, and I think that you don't necessarily need to be a person who's always had an appetite for risk or be willing to jump off planes or be the first person to organize things. You don't necessarily need to have a particular personality type. I think that some of the best things people can do who are interested in starting their own business is to take stock of their skills and their experience and their passions and take all of this great information and advice that's out there and figure out a smart path to launching their business. Not every business is the same. Not every business owner has to be the same. But regardless of your risk profile, through a lot of the things we discussed today, there are a lot of things you can do in advance to help prepare yourself to make a smart move and ultimately to create a business that is successful and that is lasting. So you've heard a lot from me, and hopefully you actually heard me this time. We've got about 10 or 15 minutes left, so if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. And we did have a couple of questions, and one or two from myself as well, which this was very stimulating engagement for me. But our first question is sort of to do with, back to at the beginning of your slide, you talked about your and the question is, how did you leverage 60 vocab's intellectual property? And, when you were sort of first coming up with your business development strategy, was IP here at that point, or did that sort of come into thinking later down the road?
I would say that we were more interested in seeing whether the idea had a market before we were interested in protecting it. That said, we went to people that were in a variety of markets that we were interested in to see whether the product had legs. And, we didn't do it by making everybody sign NDAs or anything like that, which 20 years ago is what everybody did, and now nobody does, simply because it's one of the risks that you take when you're starting a business. As we started putting the product together and figuring out what we needed to do to get the product to market, then we started being thoughtful about the intellectual property that was being used to create it and what we needed to do to protect it, and then taking steps to actually put that protection into place. I think, because we had the experience at our team to identify those points early, that was a little bit easier for us than it is for some other businesses. But one of the things that I think entrepreneurs should do is, as you're sort of figuring those things out, go find advice from people that can help you to figure out what those particular IP issues are and how you can protect them.
Awesome, thank you. And so, you mentioned sort of at the beginning, while you're preparing yourself, not being as concerned with putting your idea out there, that you wanted to make sure you had some sort of a market for the idea before you continued to invest time and money into creating something that would launch. But and I mentioned that you guys kind of had some background there. How did you guys, as you developed that idea, how did you end up protecting that intellectual property?
Well, there's a lot that's covered through trade secret, and there's also harder forms of IP protection. We did look into a patent strategy. We did look into a trademark strategy. We have licensing agreements in place with components that we're licensing in, as well as the pieces of it that we are licensing out to people. So we're very conscious of what we have and how to monetize it for the different markets, as well as how to protect it based on who's accessing it, as well as protecting it as the product grows.
It's awesome you touched on trade secrets. I think that's something is sort of not thought of when people hear the word intellectual property.
It's true. A lot of people think traditionally about copyrights, about trademarks, and about patents. And, the first thing that I think most people who invent a product think about is, I'm going to get a patent on it. And, patents aren't available for every product, but particularly for software, games, or other things. There's been much less of a focus in recent years on actually getting patents for them, simply because software patents are much, much harder to get, and recent federal legislation has certainly contributed to that, but also that the market moves and the product changes so quickly, and the patent process is so slow that those two things don't always match. But you do have common law protections, such as trade secrets and others, to rely on to help protect it.
Great, thank you. Our next question is not as much to do with IP so much as sort of just dealing with having a business. The road is long, and there's never a guarantee that you will succeed. So when you encounter opinions like that, how do you battle any sort of negativity or doubt in the business? And second part of that, do you think that doubt is healthy, or is it a red flag?
Do I think is what healthier? Is it a red flag?
Doubt or negativity.
Oh, doubt. Sorry, it cut out. I think a little bit of doubt is healthy. I think too much just leads you into a spiral. And, I think it's hard to muster all the strength yourself. So having a team, having people in your personal life or at home that can be there to support you. Be realistic as well, but be there to support you through that, as well as having an advisory board are all key things. Because, there are definitely days when I question myself and certain things that we're doing. And I think it's sometimes very easy just to get lost in your own head. So having people that you can rely on to help test things and also help keep you, within a framework that is productive is a really good thing. And some of it is just leaving it up to chance. That's the biggest thing about entrepreneurship that is different from the working world is that it doesn't necessarily mean that what you do today is going to lead to what you want, an outcome. And I think sometimes when you're in a more stable job with a more stable environment, that's what you see every day. So just because you're not getting the output or the result that you want doesn't actually mean that you failed. It's just simply taking you in another direction. And I think that's the biggest lesson that I've learned so far. I feel like we've accomplished a ton and I've learned a ton, and that in and of itself is a success. Sometimes the ways that we define success are much more rudimentary in that, and realizing that this whole process and actually going on it and pursuing it and making things happen are actually markers of success. So when you think about it from a learning framework as opposed to just an end game framework, it becomes easier to manage.
That's a really good frame of mind to have, and probably very fun to sort of keep you grounded, but at the same time moving forward.
Yes.
That sort of leads us into our last question, which is, what were some surprising lessons learned? So you sort of touched on one of those, but do you have any others stick out in your mind as that you'd like to share with the entrepreneurs out there?
So in terms of building our product, everything takes longer and costs more. Probably heard that before. It does. The second is always be selling ahead of the curve. So even, when we just had screenshots and some mock-ups, we were out pitching it. And I think that's really to customers, not to investors, but to customers. And we got a ton of valuable feedback that way that we wouldn't have found otherwise. The third is, as you are building your business, look for, we look for markets that you might not necessarily have seen before. We can't make announcements on them yet, but we'll say that, we accidentally found our way into some markets that we never would have looked at. And when they initially came to us, we thought, oh, well, this isn't a direction we want to take our business. But we thought, well, this is sort of being presented to us. We need to kick the tires on it. And we did, and we're actually being pleasantly surprised. So it's kind of a happy accident. And I think that's some of the greatest luck startups can have are happy accidents. And, of course, it's up to the team to decide, is this a proper use of time and resources to move it in that direction? But sometimes you just got to go to try. The last thing is, figure out when you're working on something and it really doesn't work, you guys have to have a sense of really what the limit is before you move on to something else. Because there's no easy answer for what that line is between you just got to keep trying and it doesn't work, let's move over here. So that's something that we kind of struggle with every day as we're building our markets, but is a really good lesson to be mindful of, because we know that we're learning, but we also know that at some point we have to make calls on certain markets and sort of figure things out. So those have been really good lessons that we've learned.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jennifer, and thank you everybody for your questions, and Jennifer for your time. Oh, there's your last screen. So if you guys want to get in touch with Jennifer, of course, here's her information. This is your screen. I'll let you explain your contact.
Thanks. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share with you today. I really appreciate it. I think it's an honor to be able to do so. I am happy to answer questions. The best way to reach out to me is through email or Twitter, Jennifer@60vocab.com or @60vocab on Twitter. Of course, there's also our Facebook page, which you can post to as well. I would just say, as you're thinking about it, realize that no matter where you are on the risk continuum, there's always ways for you to move forward. You just got to figure out what that looks like for you. It may not be what somebody else does. It may not be what you read about. It can still lead you to a very successful and fulfilling business. So I hope that, all of you have learned a lot and will take some time to really think about the great skills and experience and passions that you have to help launch a new idea and make it possible and accessible to the world.
Awesome. Jennifer. And some kind of exciting updates from us as well. And Jennifer, we'll definitely keep an eye out. I know you said that you got to kind of keep it secret for the moment, but that you're expanding into new avenues, which is exciting. So I wanted to share some of our updates as well. And this is the first that we've talked about it, so also very exciting. Our new features that we're releasing on 10.1, we've added a bunch of new questions for our current users, the ID or IP questionnaire, like it says there, about contracts and agreements, as well as any open questions. Also the ability to document legal and filing fees, trademarks, patents, and copyrights. Inserting a custom header on the IP strategy reports who are licensing with us. The new diagnostic IP report, which gives a very, very easy to see and use, what am I trying to say, like a bar graph of helping you through the report. And then also, we have a new live chat feature, which has been successful thus far for people who get stuck in the report or have any sort of impeding questions as they're going through the software. And last but not least, make sure you're signed up for the TrackLight blog, the best place to get IT information. We are coming out with some new ebook and white paper offers and are always posting once a day. Make sure to check the blog as well tomorrow. We'll have a great recap written by Maddie, our marketing specialist here at TrackLight, recapping some of your questions as well as key points to remember for all the entrepreneurs and startups. So thanks again for everybody. We'll definitely be sending you a recorded session as well as the slides, which you can also on YouTube and SlideShare respectively. And then if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to TrackLight at info@tracklight.com. All right. Thank you very much, Jennifer.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.